Recording live from the engine room in Broad Ripple, this is the Voices of Indy podcast hosted by Josh Gillespie. Voices of Indy is a show dedicated to giving you the opportunity to know the musical, visual, and theatrical arts of Indianapolis, Indiana. This week's guest is composer and multi-time award winner A. Paul Johnson. Paul's background includes being a Fellowship Award winner with the Kennedy Center, a two-time Pulitzer Prize Award for Music nominee, and a recipient of the fellowship through a National Endowment for the Arts that provided music for programs in the prison systems. He's also been awarded fellowships and grants by the Florida Arts Council, the Indiana Arts Commission, Meet the Composer, and Arts Midwest, as well as many local arts organizations. And today's episode is sponsored by the Indianapolis Independent Entertainment. IIE LLC's goal is to help grow local DIY artists, freelancers, and businesses within Indianapolis and generate more paying creative opportunities. Their mission is simple: to establish a network of creatives who excel in areas of need and connecting them with other network members. This way, they can help to expand the local art and music scenes. IIE believes that by eliminating some of the intimidating barriers within the entertainment industry, more opportunities will be produced for local freelancers and businesses. This will help Indianapolis become the place to go for art and music in the Midwest. If you're interested in learning more, go to their website, www.indyent.com. That's INDYINDIEENT.com. And fill out a free application to discuss how you and IIE can redefine making it together. Mr. Johnson, Paul, if I may.
I got the nickname A. Paul because I was doing a show in Florida, and there were like 4 Pauls. We found out there was a B. Paul and a C. Paul, and actually, I think it was a D. Paul. I think it was A, B, C,
Wow.
D. So the A. Paul helped us identify each other, and
Sure.
It sort of stuck. And the reason I had the A. Paul to begin with, I used to just go by Paul, was when I joined BMI. I joined BMI, which is broadcast music, as a composer, back when it was all analog, and you could not have the same name as another composer. So if I just use Paul Johnson, there's another Paul Johnson out there.
Sure.
So
Get your name to the top of the list, you go A.
Yeah, so, picked the first letter off the front of the alphabet, stuck it on there, and I got my BMI count. I just wanted my royalties.
That's a great story. I love it.
Yeah, and then I was just plain Paul, and like I said, until I did that show, and then everybody was, it's D. Paul, it's A. Paul, it's B. Paul, and
Well, now we got A. Well, I'm glad we have A. Paul, the A. Paul Johnson.
Well, I know you mentioned, I'm a little bit of a recluse and quiet a lot of the time, and you said you hadn't, heard much about my work prior to this, and that used to always be my joke. I'm A. Paul Johnson temporarily until the name really gets big, and then I become the Paul Johnson.
That's true.
So you're right on track.
I am right on track then, yes. So you've already started here a bit. Give me a little bit of background. Tell me about yourself. You're originally from Indianapolis.
I grew up in Indianapolis, down around Brookside Park, and when I got ready to go to high school, I got a scholarship to Brebeuf to be their musician. I accompanied the choirs and, played for the chapel services, and had just a wonderful time. Learned, a lot about music by being thrown into the pit and, being able to play. And, of course, that was a great education. It's a marvelous school, and met a lot of people, including at the time Tom Brichetti. And Tom Brichetti, back then, we're talking about the 70s, disco time. Brichetti was the associate conductor of the Indianapolis Symphony Orchestra. And so he would invite me down to listen to those rehearsals. He said, if you're going to write, because I write symphonies, big concert pieces, you need to have all those sounds in your head. And so he was great about that, and just a marvelous teacher. Opened up a lot of repertoire to me, and contacts. He referred me to some other wonderful composers who, as soon as I said Brichetti, the conversation was open, because he was so well respected in the music world. And when I was first here, Heron School of Art, when it used to be on 16th Street, had a performing arts program, and I worked there for a little while and did some shows for Indiana Repertory Theater as both music director and composer, and did that for, maybe 2 years, sort of the end of high school, right out of high school, and then got involved with the regional theater circuit from contacts I'd made at IRT, and started traveling. And after being tired of living out of a suitcase for a couple of years, I landed in Florida and spent close to 40 years in Florida.
Wow.
So I just am back fairly recently to retire here because it's my home. Go back, the eternal return.
That's true.
Back to
Yes.
back to your roots. And so it's been nice being back in Indianapolis for the last few years.
Well, you haven't really exactly stayed retired, though. You're continuing to do a lot of work, aren't you?
I don't know how that happened. As we were talking earlier, I think the shutdown, because it forced me to retire. There was nothing going on, particularly for performing. I did a lot of writing during that time.
Mm-hmm.
But I didn't like being told by, little buggy things or microbes that I could not go out and play
Sure.
if I didn't want to. So as soon as the shutdown started to lift, and I am I guess what they'd call an at-risk age. So I was careful coming out, but once I got back into the system, people were so hungry to get back singing and dancing and on stage and playing programs that it was like whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. I was, back working actually close to full time now.
That's incredible. So give me a little bit of insight into composing. I mean, I'm a musician. I've had a number of musicians on the show. I like kind of getting into their head a bit about what inspires them, what gets them to, whether it's the inspired to perform or the inspired to what is inspiring them to write. I have to imagine that writing a symphony is far more arduous than sitting down and writing a 4 to 5 minute song. I think back to when I saw Amadeus as a kid, and just the pages and pages and pages. And granted, that was, I have to imagine still you're doing a lot of that by hand.
I still write everything by longhand with ink pens.
Wow.
Dip pens or cartridge pens.
Wow.
I've had some of the modern computer, and they slow me down so much. It's interesting you say that, of all the first questions to come out, because I just gave a little bit of this program last week here in town, and then I'm going up to Lafayette tomorrow to give another little piece of it. But that question, most musicians, they like to think they're mysterious in their creative processes. So, like most composers and songwriters, where does your inspiration come from? They would sort of blow it off, and well, I was in love, and then they broke my heart, and all that kind of stuff.
Sure.
And that can be part of it, but it's also a discipline. And as I mentioned again earlier, as we were talking, I wrote a lot on commission.
Mm-hmm.
So you've got 70 musicians waiting to have those parts on their stands. And particularly if it's a union orchestra, I mean, even if it's not, it's got to be there on time or they won't play it.
Yeah.
So you had to learn some discipline, to get things on track, and you couldn't wait for inspiration. It's nice when it came, but
Sure.
if it didn't come, then you had to rely on the technique. But about 30 years ago, I was in Ocala, Florida, and I was their pit conductor. We heard some songs from Evita on the radio coming over here, and I think I was conducting Evita when this occurred to me to do this. But the symphony down there was also premiering an overture of mine that was a commission piece from the horse industry.
Mm-hmm.
And it was an overture on Pegasus. They wanted a horse theme. And a lot of the people from the theater who did not know I was a composer went out of curiosity. And of course, their first question, because it was, big concert overture for, I think, about a 65-piece orchestra. And the first question is, where do you get your inspiration? So I actually started this little workshop, this little creativity workshop that both from research and practice I put together to help people understand how I go through that process and where I find not only that mix between discipline and inspiration, but how to find the right collaborators, how to learn to work with, if you're going to work with a lyricist, if you're going to work with a book writer, if it's a theater piece. If you do get writer's block, how to break that open, how to use humor, how to understand how your brain works, how the little impulses in those dendrites, exchange information, so that if you get the same thing going over and over, you got to have a way to break out of it.
Yes.
So that became part of my work too, and sharing that process. And boy, that has been great fun, because people call me or write me, or of course now it's all email, about projects that they've not been able to get off the ground that now seem to be fluid for them. And a lot of it is dreaming, dreaming, letting your mind open to those creative realms that are infinite. I mean, we live in an infinite universe.
Mm-hmm.
And if you can learn to open that door, you can get anything you want starting to stream through it.
Mm-hmm.
And then you pick out. I always say that particularly a great piece of music is that perfect balance between content and intent.
Mm-hmm.
It's not only what you put into it as far as musical materials, but it's why you're writing. If you're writing to deepen someone's connection to life, to help open that door to other people, to that infinite source of inspiration. If you're writing out of love, if you're writing because the collaborators you're writing for, the musicians you're writing for, are your dearest friends in the world, and you just want their success more than yours, that intent guides the piece as much as the content, and it should. So pieces that may not be perfectly constructed still have this magic about them because of why you wrote it.
I love this talking about the why.
Yeah, it's not touched on too often, is it?
No, it isn't.
Yeah.
There is an artist that who I kind of keep in touch with that he talks about, and he's more of your typical singer-songwriter kind of musician. That he writes his why is because he wants music that he can relate to. Because he's in a period of life where he's not going to find a lot of things that touch on where he is, but he knows that there are probably other people out there feeling the same way he is.
Mm-hmm.
And so he writes, as he says, autobiographically. And that is his why, is because he's providing basically his own soundtrack. And that's how he encourages other people when they write, is to write what write your soundtrack. But I like your why, because your why is also it can be so broad.
Yes, a lot of people listen to my music, and I think this has been why commercially I have been problematic to everybody. I've managers and publishers, and I'm on my third publisher now, because my music doesn't sound the same. I know. I had a manager in Florida for a while when we had our production company, who got us on some of those streaming outfits.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, the first thing that comes through is my music sounds like.
Yes.
And you're supposed to list 3 people your music sounds like. Well, it depends on what piece you're listening to. Most of my music, people will listen to it and they'll have absolutely no idea unless the composer is announced. It's the same person that wrote the piece that they maybe heard 3 days before.
Sure.
I don't necessarily personally get involved with my writing that much. Again, it's opening that door. It's looking at who's performing it. It's looking at who the audience is. It's looking at, what the call is. 50th anniversary, Indianapolis Philharmonic. And that's the call. What is going to be important about that situation that I can create, a dramatic interface with?
Mm-hmm.
So it might be me, it might not be me.
Mm-hmm.
My partner Cheryl's out there, and we were listening to some of my pieces the other night, and she was listening to a piece of mine called Hello, Dali. It's a ballet I wrote for the Florida Dance Festival, and was commissioned by the Salvador Dali Museum, which, if you've ever seen, is a wild place.
Uh-huh.
And even though I took the inspiration for the pieces by sitting, they opened the museum up to me, and I got to sit just alone in front of these 11 Dali paintings. And I did some automatic writing to give me a... But the first thing out of her mouth when she heard it is, she said, "That's you personally."
She heard you in the music.
She heard me personally in the music. I think stronger in that piece than anything else I'd written. And I thought that was really odd because I did not think I was personally involved with it. But it was automatic writing. It was a 45-minute ballet that I wrote in 48 hours.
What?
Yes. I mean, it was one of those... I go into a kind of trance state when I write.
I was going to say, that had to be some sort of trance state.
Yeah, it was a trance state. And I just was writing and writing and writing. And it was a combination of writing it down and working at the keyboard a little bit and writing it down and working at the keyboard. It's scored for 5 keyboards and ring modulator and voice. And, of course, a lot of very bizarre, surrealistic sounds. But it sounded in my head through the first time so absolutely clearly. It took almost no editing, which is, for a big piece, unusual. And I still like the piece. I mean, it's very, very quirky. And that piece has never been performed. Of course, the dancers have a lot to do with it. It has never been performed in a house that was not sold out.
Wow. That is incredible.
So, that's, again, one of those universes talking to me,
Yeah.
and you let it in and you let it go through and maybe that's who I am. I'm vacant without that door open. I don't know. Because, people who, have complimented that score very highly. So, that's the process I use a lot. I'm working on a new opera now.
Oh, really? Yes, you actually mentioned to me when we were chatting over email that you were working on a few arias.
Well, I just finished an opera in 2018, and my publisher, who's here in Indianapolis, I'm with Performers Edition now, which is here in Indianapolis, which is nice because we can talk and I can get things quickly, and he's kind of helping me understand what my legacy catalog should look like.
Sure, yes.
I'm an old fart, so. Anyway, so I just finished that opera. It's not even been completed. The orchestration's not even been completed. But Mark, my publisher, said, we need, in order to market this, I need some arias recorded. So I orchestrated a few arias, and we got them out, and got some people listening to them. Some great singers. The one tenor aria is actually sung by Kirk MacLeod. And if anybody here is a Celtic rocker and knows Seven Nations, he's the lead singer for Seven Nations.
Yes.
So to hear him singing opera is, I think, worth a listen anyway.
Spirit and the swirling wind, hear my prayer. Breathe the life on water's fire, earth and air. Are you child crying? Son of the sun, spirit and the stones and weeds and the deer beneath me, and may I walk in the beauty of my land. Let me learn from the thunder born in the sky. So when life fades, I can join your joy. Oh, let me walk and wander until my sunset. My sunset red. Hear my breath, spirit as I raise my voice. Hear my breath, spirit as I raise my voice. Up to your ears in the clouds. Then harvest me with your gun.
So we were just starting to get some feedback on it, a few nibbles, including an opera company in Poland, and the shutdown, COVID-19 came through.
Yes.
And so that stopped progress on that,
Mhm.
and we haven't really started it up again. But during the shutdown, I started a new opera. I had so much fun, and I don't know if we should talk about what that first opera was about or not.
Well, let's go right ahead. I mean,
might
if you feel
scare your
no, let's do it. Let's dive
story-
right in.
this
What's the story?
This story, it's called Love, Ted.
Mm-hmm.
And that's how Ted Bundy signed his letters to Anne.
You wrote an opera about Ted Bundy?
Yeah. Not Anne Rice. Anne, his true crime writing friend. Her name escapes me right now. We actually had some correspondence. She just didn't want Ted Bundy dancing across the stage in tights. She says that was the only thing she didn't want to see from the piece. But she was a great mystery writer and trying to get background. What started it was my ex-wife. I've been married quite a few times. I love being married. That's why I keep doing it over and over and over. Anyway, she awoke with a nightmare one night, just screaming and shivering and flailing and pounding the bed and gasping for air and scared me. I'd never seen a nightmare like that. And I asked her what it was, and she said Ted Bundy was sitting on top of me trying to strangle me.
Oh, my goodness.
And she could not get that image out of her head.
Can imagine not.
I said just in passing, maybe you need to write this down or do, like a diary entry about it. You need to do something to flush it out of your system because it was really bothering her. And she said, well, what if I do a libretto for a show? Would you do the music for it? Because she'd done a lot of my lyrics. We were collaborators.
Oh, my. Okay.
And
that's how she was processing this?
that's how she was processing it. And I,
Like right there on the spot?
well, it might be a couple of days after.
Okay.
So, I'm grimacing and thinking, really, Ted Bundy? And then I thought, well, there's some really bloody operas out there.
There are.
I was in the chorus of a Lucia di Lammermoor years ago, back when I had the temerity to sing. But, the whole last 20 minutes, she's covered in a bloody nightgown singing some of the most beautiful music in the world. So I said, okay, let's try it. And she started it 2 or 3 times and couldn't do it. Bought every book been published on Ted Bundy. We watched all the movies back when Mark Harmon, got kind of blacklisted back in those days from portraying such a dastardly character, and I was worried as a composer I would be like
Sure. Yeah, no, I can understand that.
for writing such a horrible piece. So on and off we tried it. We went out to Seattle and walked all the places where Bundy hung out, ate at the restaurants where he ate,
Wow.
walked by the houses, and went out to Lake Sammamish. I mean, we really tried to see if we could get into this, and I just couldn't do it. Just thought it was ridiculous. So, actually, after I had come back here to Indianapolis, I was having dinner with some singing friends. At that time, I was at a house down on South Meridian, old house, and it was very conducive to talking about opera and music and all that. And I touched on this story, and everyone at the table said, "Oh, you've got to write that opera.
Mm-hmm.
You've got to write that opera. There's just something's got to happen with it." And again, I said, "Oh no, that's too dastardly." About a week later, I dreamed the whole thing. Dreamed it from beginning to end, just kind of like I did with
kidding me.
Hello, Dolly. All the arias, the way it was set up, how it was structured to present the women and composite the women, and then over the course of, now that one didn't happen overnight. I mean, it took me, I don't know, maybe 3-4 months.
Sure, but you had a vision for it.
Score, but yeah, every note of it was there. And a friend of mine, Paul Nicely, a well-known director, stage director here in town, he loved it so much that he recorded some of Bundy's songs.
Really?
For me. That did not get fully orchestrated. It was just me at the piano and
Mm-hmm.
doing that. So we haven't distributed those yet because we've been trying to get the orchestrated ones out. But that's how it happened. It just
What's the name of it?
It's called Love Ted.
Oh, that's right. Yes, you mentioned that. Yes,
And
I'm sorry.
and I'm talking about a 20-year process there.
Yeah.
From that first nightmare to when I put the final notes on the piano score was about 20 years.
Wow.
And I fought it and I fought it and I fought it that whole time. And it's like, I don't know, Bundy must have had one of his hands on my neck because he was not letting me go until that opera was finished.
Wow.
Yeah. So.
And so is this, forgive me if I seem to have glossed over something, but I mean, is this something that has it been performed yet, or is this in the process of?
Not fully.
Not
no.
full. Okay.
Just some of the songs.
This is what you're teasing out, the arias from this. Okay.
Yeah, some of the songs and arias
Mm-hmm.
have been performed in recital, mostly in South America. I work with several groups in Argentina that
Mm-hmm.
kind of became fans of my music, so they were all recorded in Argentina.
So when you have another culture like that being
Mm-hmm.
exposed to what was a true fascination character through the press, through the just
Mm-hmm.
all the gory details, what's that like? I mean, what's their response to something like that? Especially since it's a true story.
Here's what I've found, though, that, and this may be politically too correct, or so politically correct that it's incorrect. Everything exists with its opposite.
Sure.
But we have been obsessed for the last 400 years with the age of reason, and that the material world is something we can depend on and we know how it works.
Mm-hmm.
I think what the latter part of the 20th, well, really almost all of the 20th century has taught us is that the material world does not work the way we thought it did. And coming in underneath that through that time is this quantum world. And if you use a cell phone or you watch TV or, use the beautiful equipment that you're using here, it's all run on quantum mechanics. The mechanical world of Newton could not provide this setting for us. So whether you like it or not, it's here.
Mm-hmm.
And it's guiding us. And what the quantum world basically says is at the highest level, the broadest level of universal nothingness is the only place where nothing changes. That's sort of what we think of as the spiritual world.
Mm-hmm.
And then underneath that, supporting it, is the emotional world, where the arts have their language. And the emotional world doesn't change much. Music is such a precise language. It's such a precise mathematical language. That's why I ask if you had a piano here, because I usually demonstrate this when I talk about it.
Mm-hmm.
I can make you feel any way I want you to feel. By the way I move through harmonic changes and rhythmic changes, I can change your energy. You know that when you've gone to a concert. That's why we go to a concert, so we're feeling everything the same as everybody else around us, and we're all either dancing or we're singing or we're swaying or something like that. And that joining us together is so healthy and necessary, so we don't feel separated out. We don't feel isolated as a human being. And then the intellectual world comes in under that. And you know that the emotional world's more powerful than the intellectual world, because if you've ever been upset, you can't think straight.
That's true.
You
That is
know?
absolutely true.
The emotional world beat the crap out of your intellect. I don't care how smart you are. If you're emotionally distraught or emotionally elated, I mean, you know, like I say, I've gone through that with a lot of wives where I've been emotionally elated. It's like my reason went out the window.
Sure.
So, and then the material world sits down at the very bottom, and it's the one that changes the most. You know, we don't drive the same kind of cars, we don't eat the same kind of food, we don't interact with the physical world. We don't even drink tap water anymore. We're going to have something out of a bottle. I mean, all those things have changed. All those processes have changed. And the material things that we depend on have changed. Same with the intellectual world. You know, now if it doesn't come in one of these boxes or on your phone or on a computer, we don't even deal with it. There are people out there who don't even believe the intellectual world exists without those machines. So, yeah, those worlds are going to constantly change, and we can creatively move them around and manipulate them very easily. But the emotional, that's why art, you can look at a piece of art from 1,000 years ago and it'll move you.
Mm-hmm.
But try driving a car from 1,000 years ago.
Yeah.
And if you forgot your horse, it's not going anywhere.
Yeah.
So we can depend on that. And then we can depend on, like I say, those doors that open to that universe, that cosmic consciousness, to tell us the things that are important that we remember over time, over lifetime after lifetime after lifetime, and to express those as part of art too. And that's where art goes from being popular art to being great art. That's where Beethoven's Ninth Symphony comes from. That's where Guernica comes from. That's where Dr. Zhivago comes from. You know, those pieces will be with us to remind us along the way who we are. And whereas Yummy, 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 I Got Love in My Tummy may not make that journey.
I often think about what is it that causes a piece of music or a piece of art to have this kind of lasting impact.
You've got to get it from the cosmic consciousness. You've got to, if you think it's going to come to you personally, I think you're missing an important piece of the puzzle.
Mm-hmm.
You got to move yourself out of the way just a little bit. It's kind of like an actor. I love actors. I love working in the theater because they basically empty themselves out and put a new character in there. And you know what? Sometimes I don't even recognize them. Actors I've known for decades because they are so thorough about that. And boy, what a discipline! What a way to turn your entire being, your body, your mind, your emotions into a work of art right there in front of us. Musicians have that ability too. I do a lot of vocal coaching, and I said, you know, you've got to give yourself up and sing the song. It's the song that is calling us from that other realm, not necessarily you. And if you can move yourself out of the way and let that song come through, I mean, I've seen particularly singers do that for the first time, and I mean, just goosebumps. I mean, it's like little sparks are flying off of them for the first time, and they go, "What just happened to me?"
Yeah.
And I said, "You opened that door, and something came through you that is truly miraculous." And now you got to go out. You got to learn to do that all the time and go out and share it with an audience. So that's the trick to, I think, any art form is you know, to learn to open that little door, even if it's a pinprick. If you get a pinprick things start coming through there that just are marvelous, and you start to recognize them in great works of art. You know, I love to play Bach. I'm kind of a Bach nut. And because Bach, for some reason, over 1,000 compositions, managed to do it, I think, just like every time. You know, it's like, what an amazing guy. And he wasn't a super intellectual. I mean, he just said it all came, you know, he wrote, you know, Ad Gloria, was it Ad Deum Ad Gloria? Or, you know, it's all done for the glory of God. He just thought it was, you know, the spirit world opening up to him, and you know, he wrote so quickly he couldn't have been thinking about it. So
talk about being in that trance.
Yeah. So we listen to a work of Bach and we say this is, you know, a work of marvelous genius, because Bach got out of the way. I don't think any of us are actually really geniuses. The genius is out there. And you got to get yourself out of the way and let it through. And then, you know, the illusion is, you know, you become the genius.
Yes. For me, it's that getting out of the way. I know that personally, when I'm writing music, it is the most difficult thing to get out of my own way.
Yep.
How do you get out of your own way?
Again, I just go into this kind of trance state. And oddly enough, I know I usually like to work privately. There's been very, very few people who have actually ever seen me working at writing. Cheryl being one of the few people on this planet that I feel so comfortable with. I just can work in front of her all the time. But yeah, I go into this trance state, and I actually usually play other music while I'm working, while I'm composing.
Really?
Because I think it takes that. I know they say there's really no right brain, left brain per se, but there are parts of your brain that have different functions. And I think listening to other music, particularly Bach, I'll put on, you know, Brandenburg concertos or something like that, I think it takes away that identifying part of my left brain, that objective brain, gets it out of the way, so that the subjective brain can work separately in terms of the writing. And particularly on a big piece like I'm doing now with a full orchestra and a big opera cast, all of that detailed work goes in with other music going on, carrying on conversations, you know, sometimes eating, you know. I like a cigar sometimes when I'm working. Not too often. That's a bad habit for an old guy. But yeah, you've got to have those little rituals that take you out of yourself, so that other realm can have its say. And a lot of times, I've finished pieces like big symphonies, you know, big 80-piece orchestra symphonies, and I'll go to the premiere. I mean, sometimes I've even been able to conduct them or been asked to conduct them. And I'll hear this piece, and the, you know, crowd goes wild or whatever. You know, I like to think most of my pieces have landed pretty strongly with the audiences. And I walk off the stage, and it's like, did I write that? You know, there's a part of me that doesn't believe I have done what I have done.
What are the emotions that are going through you? Like, as you are conducting, I mean, let me rephrase this. Do you feel those emotions after the piece is done, or do you feel them as
during
while you're conducting?
Yeah, again, when we were chatting earlier, I just finished conducting Sweeney Todd here in town for Footlight, and I was able to come in early and talk to the cast about how I was going to interpret as a conductor, which really helped. And I even came in early to play some of the rehearsals for them so they could hear how I was interpreting the music, because I wanted them to understand the emotional content of that score, which was so complex and so rich and so relentless for 3 hours. Very overlapping emotions and tongue-in-cheek emotions and hidden emotions, but they were there because music reveals that subtext what you're thinking and feeling inside, not necessarily what you're saying. And we went through that score and talked about where they were at odds and where the characters were letting loose. And then we had a 14-piece orchestra come into the pit, which was hard with that pit. It's not a big pit to get those people. And then I went through that same process with the orchestra so that they understood, I mean, moment by moment, what was going on emotionally in that score. And it shifts, every beat, every change of note shifts that emotion, and you've got to shift it while you're playing. And if you're not immersed, I mean, from the second violinist to the, young lady standing in the back of the chorus, if you're not connected to that emotion, something's going to be lost. But if you are connected to that emotion, as I mentioned to you before, sold out every performance and set records for that theater for attendance and income, which after COVID they needed.
Yeah.
Because everyone in that room, maybe not 100% of the time, but I would say most of the time, was having the same experience as was on the stage and in the pit and in the house. It was all joined together having that same experience, not just visually and orally and intellectually, but on those deep emotional levels, on those spiritual levels. That's priceless. That's what art's about. That's when high art becomes so powerful that the people who were there, they'll never forget that. The cast wants to do the show again. They can't believe they're not performing it.
When you're in a moment like that, do you recognize it, and then, like, if it was me, if I recognized it, it would paralyze me?
You have to have a nervous system that understands that process. And, I've just been blessed with it. I don't know. I mean, I have played shows on that level when, I have been, ill or exhausted. And again, you go into that state for it to happen. I, regret to say a few times when I was hungover, that, and people said, well, I didn't notice anything different about your performance. And they shouldn't. Again, I just have the kind of metabolism that allows me to go in and do that. I've gone over 50 years in performing, and I have never missed a scheduled performance of any kind.
That's incredible.
Yeah,
In
I mean,
over
knock
50
on
years.
wood. And,
Sure.
I'm getting to be, like I say, a little long in the tooth to keep bragging on that.
Well, for someone who is quote unquote retired.
Yeah, for someone who said I wasn't going to do this anymore.
Yeah.
But yeah, there's just something about my body, my physicality, that knows when that moment is arising, that it transforms itself and allows it to happen. And then as soon as the show's over, I may collapse walking out of the pit, or faint in the dressing room or something like that. But during the time of the performance, it knows it has to sustain me through that moment. At least so far.
Well, we have covered so much, and yet I feel like we've barely scratched the surface with you.
Okay. Well, volume 2.
Well, I honestly feel like we probably have to do this again. But I ask this of all of my guests because I want to ensure that we cover as much as possible. What have we missed? What have I not asked that you would like to mention? Anything that is coming up that we should know about?
Well, I'm actually on a grant right now with Center for Congregations, which is Lilly Endowment, their support group for area churches, because churches are struggling to come out of COVID, and the marriage between art and faith. As a matter of fact, you said, what haven't we covered? And I was almost going to say this before this sidetrack came in, and I'll see if I can tie it back up quickly, is an immensely practical as well as powerful way to reconnect people to their faith journey and expressing themselves through either traditional or modern religious practice. Ritual is important for us. We all have all kinds of rituals in the theater. You know, you can't even mention the Scottish play backstage. So I think the same is true of art, and I think that's why artists are maybe needed in sacred settings right now very strongly, is because I don't think you could do this job unless you have faith. You got to believe it.
Mm-hmm.
If you don't believe it, there's going to be something artificial in your work. You've got to believe it the way, an acolyte nun believes in God.
Mm-hmm.
It's got to, just take over your being. And you've got to, again, allow that to happen. You get out of the way. And I think our religious practice has become too me-focused,
Mm-hmm.
Individual-focused, to allow that to happen too. So the prayers go out from me as an individual to God, but the door never opens back up for God to talk back.
Sure, yeah.
I know too much. I'm not going to listen to that,
Yeah.
So, so this fellowship, this grant, or whatever you want to call it, is up for a year, and I started working with a couple of churches here in town, and have been now for almost a month at one of the historic churches, Trinity Methodist, up in Lafayette, and about how the arts need to start intertwining, not only for the art itself, but the kind of people who practice arts need to be in those sacred settings. That's what makes holy ground, is what goes on in it.
Mm-hmm.
And when I was in Europe, I used to love to go to like Canterbury Cathedral or St. Paul's or Notre Dame, because those spaces carry so much energy and power. So, that's what I'm doing performance-wise right now. And then in Lafayette, as part of that grant, I'm going to give one of my Bach concerts on the grand piano there in the sanctuary.
Oh,
on
really?
December 11th. And it's called Bach to the Future, because it's half Bach and half my music.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Fantastic. And where's that going to be performed?
At Trinity United Methodist, which is in the Centennial neighborhood, downtown Lafayette. I think it's 509 North Street. But you can...
December 11th.
Yeah, call Trinity UMC, United Methodist Church, in Lafayette, and they'll set you up with all the details. Matter of fact, I just looked at the press release that's going out. I just had a chance to look at that yesterday.
We'll make sure that they are also linked in the show notes, so that.
Oh, absolutely, yeah, that would be great. And I'm actually, they've got a reception room because I'm going to talk about the residency too there, to how the marriage with the arts and the church is coming along. So I'll be back in the great room and have a chance to talk to folks about Bach, and because all our tuning. I mean, even world folk music now is tuning to Bach.
Mm-hmm.
Bach was the one who realized this is a natural occurrence. How we tune with the wheel of fifths.
Mm-hmm.
So if you've ever played an instrument tuned before Bach, it sounds weird.
That's putting it lightly.
Yeah. So, and that's why a lot of that old music was only written in 2 or 3 keys, because those are the only ones they could get halfway decent tuning on. So much of our structure, so much of our rhythm, our music theory, it all comes from Bach. He has changed our modern world in terms of how we create music, play music, listen to music, respond to music. So I'll be talking about that a little bit too at the post-concert gathering.
That's incredible. So December 11th at Trinity United Methodist Church in Lafayette.
Mm-hmm.
Paul Johnson, thank you so much.
Oh, you're welcome. Nice to be here. Thanks, Josh.
You're welcome. And if you like what you've heard, this has been recorded at the Engine Room Recording Company, and it is located in Broad Ripple Village, just north of downtown Indianapolis, and they specialize in making your projects go. Podcasters, bands, audio bookers, rappers, singers, songwriters, and everyone in between, the Engine Room Recording Company has the engineers, the equipment, and the environment to fuel your projects. Check out Broad Ripple's recording studio by visiting for more information on their services, artists they've recorded, and gear they have at engineroomrecordingcompany.com. And be sure to visit their Instagram page by searching Engine Room Recording Company. Paul, this has been an absolute pleasure, and I do hope to have you on again. Because, like I said, I feel like we've just barely scratched the surface with
And
you.
I hope we have it here because, I'm listening to you read the promo. This is a marvelous space. The energy and the feel of this space is just great.
It is, and next time
So-
we will try to get you a piano. But because I would love to hear what you would.
Sure, yeah, I like to play as part of the.
Yeah. So that is going to do it for us.
Okay.
Thank you so much, Paul. I've been Josh Gillespie. This has been Voices of Indy. And be sure to tune in next time. We'll be having our live stream, and this is going to be a fun one. So stick around. We'll see you guys later. Bye.
All right.